My ungrateful children had no idea they were abandoning the woman who controlled corporate expense accounts worth $47 million across 6 Fortune 500 companies, whose confused elderly mother persona they dismissed during our supposedly quick bathroom stop, would soon transform into the chief financial operations consultant, whose billing authorization codes could either restore their financial reputations or leave them explaining to their employers, clients, and business partners why a $3,200 luxury limousine service, complete with champagne and premium catering, had been charged to their corporate accounts while their abandoned 73-year-old mother rode home in style. All because the successful executives who assumed their retired mother represented a minor travel inconvenience during their busy weekend conference schedule. Never bothered to ask why Fortune 500 companies paid her $150,000 annually for financial consultation, why multinational corporations implemented her expense management systems without question, and why the luxury transportation industry personally coordinated her travel arrangements while they sat in an uncomfortable sedan, assuming she was just another elderly passenger who needed family assistance navigating modern travel rather than recognizing the woman whose financial expertise and core billing authority had been quietly managing their business expenses, coordinating their professional travel arrangement, and maintaining their pristine credit standings for over 15 years of family financial protection that required appreciation rather than abandonment, when elderly relatives needed basic courtesy and travel consideration during family trips that tested character more than highway endurance. Before we dive into this incredible story of family abandonment, needing corporate financial authority and the luxury transportation billing my ungrateful children never knew existed, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, telling me about your worst experience with family members who treated you like a burden while benefiting from help they never acknowledged, and subscribe so you never miss stories like this one, about what happens when adult children assume elderly parents are helpless travel complications, only to discover just how catastrophically expensive their assumptions can become when family disrespect meets corporate billing authority, could transform their business reputations forever, or disappear entirely based on how they chose to treat the woman whose financial expertise would make industry headlines, and whose revenge would become a cautionary tale about respecting elderly relatives whose true influence isn't always visible until it's too late to matter and too expensive to ignore. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm 73 years old, and this story begins on October 14, 2023, when I made what seemed like a simple request for my family to include me in their weekend business conference trip to Milwaukee, a routine family travel arrangement that would reveal my 3 adult children's true character and teach them the most expensive lesson about taking elderly mothers for granted, whose quiet financial consulting position, concealed corporate billing authority, and Fortune 500 relationships that could either continue protecting their comfortable business operations or disappear entirely based on how they chose to treat the woman whose financial expertise had been quietly managing their professional expenses and corporate financial standing for over 15 years of dedicated business consultation, family financial protection. To understand how my children, Patricia, a 44-year-old corporate marketing director, earning $128,000 annually at Midwest Industrial Solutions, a 41-year-old business development manager handling million-dollar client accounts for regional financial partners, and David, a 38-year-old sales executive managing luxury automotive accounts throughout the Chicago metropolitan area, ended up facing corporate billing investigation, client relationship complications, and business reputation crisis within 1 week of abandoning me at a highway gas station. You need to know who I was before my carefully maintained image, as a simple retiree, needing family travel assistance concealed the financial authority and corporate consultation expertise that had elevated me from entry-level bookkeeper to senior financial operations consultant, whose billing authorization and expense management systems affected corporate operations for over $47 million in annual business expenses throughout 6 Fortune 500 subsidiary partnerships across the Midwest business corridor. For 38 extraordinary years, I was Margaret Sullivan, dedicated financial professional at Corporate Financial Solutions International, starting as an accounts payable clerk in 1985, when corporate expense management was just transitioning from paper receipts to digital tracking systems and advancing through every level of financial responsibility until my consulting transition in 2023 as Senior Financial Operations Consultant for Multi-Corporate Expense Coordination, a position that required federal financial compliance certification, advanced corporate billing authorization, and system access that most people never understand or appreciate. My career had encompassed every aspect of corporate expense management, luxury service coordination, and executive financial operation, from basic invoice processing to complex multi-company billing systems that determined business partnerships, corporate travel arrangement, and executive service authorization for hundreds of companies whose operational success depended on accurate financial coordination and strategic expense management that could impact their business relationships, corporate standing, and executive reputations throughout the competitive Midwest business landscape. The scope of my financial responsibilities encompassed reviewing corporate expense accounts that required executive authorization, coordinating with luxury service providers who needed immediate billing verification for Fortune 500 clients, managing appeals processes for businesses that challenged corporate billing decisions that could affect their operational budget, implementing systematic expense management protocols that ensured accurate financial tracking for corporate partnerships worth millions of dollars, executive travel coordination that determined professional opportunities for senior management, and authorization systems that affected hundreds of companies' daily operations, legal compliance requirements, and business relationships that could make or break partnership opportunities throughout the greater Midwest corporate ecosystem. During my nearly 4 decades of distinguished financial service, I had personally authorized over 250,000 individual corporate transactions, supervised expense management operations for over 150 different Fortune 500 companies across 6 states, coordinated with luxury service providers, including private aviation, premium transportation, and executive accommodation services, who required immediate billing authorization for corporate client service, and managed crisis expense protocols during business emergencies that required immediate financial coordination between corporate partners, luxury service providers, and executive management teams to ensure business continuity while maintaining financial accuracy and corporate relationship integrity that balanced operational efficiency with fiduciary responsibility and partnership trust. The technological evolution that I had witnessed and managed during my career was extraordinary. From manual invoice processing systems in the early 1980s to sophisticated corporate expense databases connected to international business networks that could instantly verify billing authorization, corporate credit standings, executive approval levels, and partnership financial status across all major business centers and international corporate networks. I had been personally responsible for training over 300 corporate financial professionals in expense management protocol, authorization, security procedures, and financial decision-making that required both technical expertise and ethical judgment about how corporate authority should serve business needs rather than executive convenience or personal financial advantage. My position as Senior Financial Operations Consultant meant that I possessed what was essentially master-level access to corporate expense authorization systems, the ability to approve luxury service charges for Fortune 500 executives, coordinate multi-company billing arrangements, authorize emergency corporate expenses, implement executive financial protocols, and manage expense disputes that could instantly transform someone's business financial situation, from routine corporate operations to serious budget complications requiring extensive documentation, corporate approval processes, and executive review procedures to resolve through proper business channels and financial compliance systems. The complexity of managing corporate expense systems while maintaining accuracy, authorization protocol, and business relationship integrity had required extraordinary attention to detail and systematic understanding of corporate financial regulations, business partnership agreements, executive authorization protocol, and fiduciary responsibility standards that most business professionals never encountered or fully appreciated. Corporate financial emergencies didn't respect business hours, executive schedules, or holiday plans, and expense authorization often required weekend coordination, emergency billing approval, and immediate authorization capabilities to ensure that Fortune 500 companies maintained effective access to luxury services and executive support that could determine whether routine business travel resulted in successful partnership development or relationship complications for executives whose expense management required careful authorization, financial oversight, and corporate approval that reflected both business necessity and fiduciary responsibility. But perhaps the most significant aspect of my corporate financial career was my role in developing and implementing the authorization protocols that determined how luxury service billing was processed, approved, and coordinated throughout the Fortune 500 corporate expense management system. I had personally written policy manuals that guided corporate financial decision-making for hundreds of business professionals, established coordination procedures between luxury service providers and Fortune 500 companies, and created authorization programs that ensured consistent, appropriate application of corporate expense policies that balanced executive business needs with fiduciary responsibility and corporate financial accountability that distinguished professional business management from excessive executive spending and inappropriate corporate expense utilization. The corporate expense authorization system that I had helped design and implement served as a model for Fortune 500 companies seeking to modernize their executive financial management while maintaining authorization accuracy, business relationship integrity, and corporate service standards that distinguished professional expense management from inefficient financial administration and executive expense complications. My expertise had been consulted by corporate financial departments at major companies throughout the Midwest who wanted to implement similar expense authorization systems and financial management protocols that served executive business needs while maintaining corporate accountability and fiduciary responsibility standards required for Fortune 500 operations and business partnership integrity. The professional relationships that I had developed throughout my career included personal connections with Fortune 500 chief financial officers who relied on accurate expense management for executive operation, luxury service providers who needed immediate billing verification for corporate client services, corporate attorneys who challenged expense authorization decisions and business hearings, insurance coordinators who required expense verification for corporate fraud prevention, federal financial compliance officers who coordinated multi-state business investigations that depended on precise expense management and inter-corporate coordination that I had been facilitating for over 2 decades of specialized financial service and corporate consultation expertise. My security clearance and financial authorization had been earned through extensive background investigations, financial competency evaluations, annual performance review, and continuing education requirements that ensured I maintained the highest standards of professional competence and ethical judgment required for positions that affected millions of dollars in corporate financial operations and constitutional business rights. The training programs that I had completed included federal financial compliance coordination, expense authorization security protocols, emergency, corporate financial management, and business law procedures that prepared me for situations requiring split-second decisions about corporate right, fiduciary responsibility, and financial compliance requirements. The Financial Consultation Institute that I had established through Corporate Financial Solutions Internationals served as the premier corporate expense management training center for Fortune, accepting only executive-level financial professionals through an application process more competitive than MBA programs at prestigious business schools and requiring extensive experience in corporate financial management, or executive financial operations before candidates qualified for consideration. Our institute alumni included chief financial officers at major Fortune 500 corporations, executive financial coordinators who managed billion-dollar corporate partnership, federal financial compliance specialist at prestigious government agency, and corporate financial executives who managed expense authorization programs worth hundreds of millions of dollars and affected business operations for thousands of companies throughout multiple states and international business jurisdiction. For our intensive 6-month financial management program, which included hands-on training in Fortune 500 expense coordination, internships at our corporate facilities, and personal mentorship from me and our network of financial professionals who managed Fortune federal financial agencies and corporate financial operations that coordinated expense authorization between local businesses, Fortune and federal authorities, while maintaining fiduciary responsibility and corporate service standards that balanced business efficiency with individual corporate rights and due process requirements for expense management and financial compliance procedure. The waiting list for admission to our corporate financial institute extended over 2 years, and we regularly declined applications from financial executives at major international corporations who didn't meet our standards for corporate service, fiduciary responsibility, and commitment to business financial management that distinguished our approach from profit-focused expense coordination that prioritized efficiency and cost reduction over corporate service and fiduciary protections that should guide responsible business financial implementation and corporate expense administration throughout Fortune 500 operations and executive financial management. My position at Corporate Financial Solutions had provided our family with insights into business financial management, corporate expense protocols, and executive authorization requirements that had protected my children from the common financial mistakes, corporate billing complications, and serious business relationship violations that affected most business professionals who navigated corporate expense systems without understanding the complexity or having access to professional financial guidance and corporate authorization advocacy that could prevent minor expense issues from escalating into major business problems and corporate relationship complications. The expedited expense processing that my family observed during their occasional business travel wasn't preferential treatment or financial favoritism, it was professional courtesy extended to family members of senior financial staff who understood authorization requirements, arrived with proper business documentation, and demonstrated the respect for corporate financial professionals and expense management processes that distinguished, prepared, cooperative business travelers from those who arrived without necessary authorization, adequate financial preparation, or appropriate understanding of corporate expense requirements and professional protocols that maintained business relationship integrity and corporate financial accountability. The business expense complications that my children had accumulated over 15 years of corporate travel, unauthorized luxury service charges from Patricia's executive marketing conferences, premium transportation billing from Michael's client development meetings, expense account irregularities from David's luxury automotive industry events, had been quietly managed through corporate authorization review processes, billing coordination, and systematic expense monitoring that I had handled during my consulting hours, after business hours system access, and weekend financial coordination periods that most corporate professionals wouldn't consider part of their business responsibilities or family financial protection services. Patricia's marketing career success, which depended absolutely on maintaining corporate financial standing, executive expense compliance, and avoiding any business billing complications that could affect her ability to represent clients in executive presentation, had been systematically protected through careful monitoring of her expense accounts and proactive resolution of potential billing violations that could have escalated into serious corporate financial issues affecting her professional advancement. The luxury service charges from her executive marketing conferences the premium transportation expenses from her corporate client meeting, and the expense account complications from her frequent business travel upgrades had all been resolved through corporate authorization channels that required my personal intervention, professional relationships within the Fortune and strategic coordination with luxury service providers and corporate financial authorities. Michael's business development position, which required extensive corporate financial credibility for Fortune 5 regular expense account audits that examined business spending patterns as indicators of professional responsibility and corporate financial compliance and business reliability that his Fortune 500 clients, verified through periodic financial background investigations, had been supported systematic expense account management that ensured his corporate financial history reflected responsible business practices rather than the accumulation of billing violations that could have compromised his client relationship eligibility and business development opportunity. The premium expense charges from his client development travels throughout multiple states, the luxury service complications from his executive business entertainment requirement, and the billing irregularities from his corporate relationship building activities had been managed through corporate authorization review processes that protected his professional standing and business financial credibility. David's luxury automotive sales career, which required maintaining relationships with high-end automotive manufacturers and luxury service providers throughout Illinois and neighboring states, demonstrating industry financial expertise through personal business expense patterns and corporate billing compliance, and representing automotive luxury professionals who valued financial responsibility and business expense management knowledge, had been enhanced through corporate expense coordination that ensured his business financial records remained compliant. His expense account history demonstrated the reliability that luxury automotive professionals expected from sales executives, and his industry relationships benefited from his family's connection to corporate financial administration and Fortune 500 expense management expertise that distinguished professional automotive sales from routine vehicle marketing and basic sales operations. The clean corporate expense records that had kept their business insurance rates favorable, their professional reputations intact, and their client relationship opportunities secure represented hundreds of hours of financial intervention, expense account monitoring, authorization coordination, and corporate advocacy that I had provided without compensation, recognition, or appreciation from family members who assumed their trouble-free business expense experiences resulted from personal financial responsibility rather than systematic family protection and corporate authorization privilege that required acknowledgement and respect for the elderly relative whose financial expertise had been protecting their business operations and professional advancement opportunities. But throughout all these years of corporate financial support, family business protection, and career facilitation, through my Fortune 500 authority, I had maintained complete privacy about the extent of my financial influence, corporate billing capabilities, and authorization power within business expense management system. My children knew about my corporate job, and occasional mentions of financial paperwork, expense systems, and business coordination, but they had never understood the scope of my financial authority, the extent to which my position had been protecting their business expense privileges, or the sophisticated nature of corporate financial management and Fortune 500 coordination that determined business financial freedom for hundreds of companies and thousands of business professionals throughout the Midwest corporate corridor. My children had grown up completely unaware that their smooth interactions with luxury service providers, their expedited corporate expense processing during business travel, their ability to resolve billing complications without serious financial consequences or extended corporate investigation, and their consistent approval for executive expense authorization and business travel financing had been quietly facilitated through my corporate position, professional relationships within the Fortune 500, and strategic intervention that prevented minor expense irregularities from escalating into major business complications that could affect their professional advancement, client relationship eligibility, and corporate financial planning throughout their business careers and executive development. Patricia, Michael, and David had internalized their trouble-free business expense experiences as natural consequences of being responsible, educated professionals who understood financial requirements rather than understanding that their advantages had been created through strategic corporate financial support, family advocacy, and expense management expertise that required appreciation and respect for the elderly relative whose career had been protecting their business financial freedom, professional opportunity, and corporate security through systematic intervention and expense management that most business professionals never received or could afford through private financial consultation and corporate expense management services. The careful privacy that had protected our family relation maintained professional boundaries and avoided any appearance of impropriety or preferential treatment had also created a potentially dangerous situation where my children had never learned to appreciate corporate financial professionals, understand the complexity of business expense system, or recognize the importance of respecting elderly relative whose career achievements and financial expertise might conceal authority and influence that could significantly impact their daily business lives, professional activity, and corporate standing within expense management systems that determined their freedom of business operations and professional eligibility. The modest lifestyle that I had maintained throughout my corporate career, the comfortable but unremarkable house in a middle-class Chicago suburb, the reliable sedan that I drove to business meetings for over 12 years, the conservative clothing and practical spending habits that characterized most dedicated financial professionals, had concealed the substantial authority and decision-making power that my position provided within systems that affected millions of dollars in corporate operations and determined expense authorization, access for hundreds of Fortune 500 companies throughout the Midwest business corridor. Now, as I prepared for the weekend business conference trip and the transition to full retirement consulting that would modify my corporate access, family protection capabilities, and expense management authority, I was also preparing to test my children's character, family value, and respect for elderly relatives in ways that would determine whether they deserved continued financial support or needed to learn what their business expense lives would look like without the intervention and corporate protection that had been shielding them from the bureaucratic complications and financial consequences that most business professionals faced when navigating complex corporate expense systems without professional guidance or financial. The family conference trip that my children would treat as a minor travel inconvenience and elderly accommodation was actually an opportunity to demonstrate appreciation for the financial expertise and corporate authority that had been protecting their business operation, while testing their character and family values during a routine travel situation that would determine whether they continued enjoying the corporate financial privileges, expense authorization protection, and business advantages they had always taken for granted, or learned the hard way what happens when family disrespect meets corporate financial authority and Fortune 500 billing authorization that could transform their comfortable business lives into expensive corporate complications that most business professionals never experience, recover from easily, or resolve without extensive financial consultation and corporate relationship management. I wasn't just Margaret Sullivan, retired corporate worker needing family assistance with weekend travel to a routine conference. I was the woman whose financial authority had been quietly managing corporate expense systems, coordinating with Fortune 500 companies throughout 6 states, maintaining financial records for hundreds of businesses, and protecting my ungrateful family from the expense complications and financial consequences that their business behaviors should have generated based on their accumulated violations, corporate oversight, and assumption that business expense privileges were permanent rights rather than regulated benefits that required compliance, respect, and appreciation for the financial professionals whose expertise maintained system integrity and corporate service standards. But my children approached my conference trip request with assumptions about elderly dependents, travel inconvenience, and family obligation management that would soon prove to be the most expensive corporate mistake of their lives. About the true nature of Fortune corporate expense databases and the critical importance of maintaining respectful relationships with elderly relatives whose career achievements and financial access might conceal the power to either protect their business financial freedom or make their corporate lives incredibly complicated. Based on demonstrated appreciation and family loyalty during vulnerable travel situations, when elderly relatives needed support rather than dismissal from the very people whose comfortable business operations had been quietly protected and facilitated for decades through corporate finance expertise and Fortune 500 expense management that most business professionals could never access or afford through private consultation and executive financial service. Looking back now with the clarity that comes from watching adult children reveal their true character through their treatment of elderly mothers they consider financially confused and technologically dependent, I can see that my family's assumptions about my limited understanding of modern business systems and need for their guidance during routine corporate travel weren't sudden judgments formed during our conference trip planning conversations. They were carefully calculated assessments based on their belief that retired financial workers represented outdated professionals who couldn't navigate contemporary expense management systems without assistance from successful executives who understood modern technology, efficient business processes, and strategic financial management methods that elderly relatives couldn't comprehend or implement effectively. What my children didn't know, and what they would discover in the most expensive way possible within 1 week of abandoning me at a highway gas station, was that the modest conference attendance request that they treated as elderly accommodation actually represented the final transition coordination for someone whose corporate expense management expertise had revolutionized Fortune 500 financial systems throughout the Midwest business corridor, whose technological innovations had been adopted by international corporations as models for global expense coordination, and whose financial authority had been quietly protecting them from the corporate billing complications and business financial consequences that their spending behaviors should have generated based on 15 years of accumulated violations, expense irregularity, and assumptions that corporate financial privileges were permanent entitlements rather than regulated benefits that required compliance, appreciation, and respect for the financial professionals whose expertise maintained business relationship integrity and corporate partnership standards. The comfortable family room where my children would gather for their final coordination meetings about the Milwaukee conference, furnished with traditional pieces that reflected my preference for understated elegance rather than corporate status displays or financial achievement symbols, actually served as the strategic planning center for someone whose corporate innovations had transformed how Fortune 500 companies managed executive expenses, coordinated luxury service billing, and processed millions of dollars in corporate transactions annually through systems that I had personally designed, implemented, and supervised throughout my distinguished career in corporate financial services and business expense administration that required both technical expertise and ethical judgment about how corporate authority should serve business needs rather than executive convenience. The family photos and professional certificates that covered my walls weren't just proud mother displays, they were visual documentation of corporate recognition that my family had never questioned or investigated. Assuming my business career was routine financial work rather than understanding that the framed commendations from Fortune 500 chief executive officers, the appreciation letters from federal financial compliance agencies, and the professional development certificates from advanced corporate management programs represented expertise and authority that affected business expense systems throughout North America and influenced financial policy decisions at the Fortune 500 level that determined how major corporations managed executive travel, luxury service coordination, and business partnership relationships. The modest kitchen where I would prepare simple meals for ungrateful children was equipped with secure communication systems that allowed me to coordinate with corporate financial officials, Fortune 500, and luxury service providers who required 24/7 access to corporate billing, authorization systems for executive business emergencies, international corporate operations, and business partnership coordination that couldn't wait for normal business hours or bureaucratic scheduling constraints might compromise executive travel efficiency or corporate relationship management efforts that determined billion-dollar business partnerships and international corporate expansion opportunity. The dining room table where my family would soon reveal their true character had hosted strategic planning sessions with Fortune 500 financial officers, corporate expense coordinator, and luxury service consultants who developed integration protocols between corporate expense systems and international business networks that tracked executive spending patterns, corporate partnership relationships, business travel requirement, and international expense coordination that affected everything from routine corporate operations to complex Fortune 500 partnerships involving multinational business development, international corporate expansion, and global business relationship management that required sophisticated understanding of corporate financial regulations and international business compliance standards. My home office, which appeared to be a simple retirement workspace with basic computer equipment and traditional furniture, actually contained sophisticated financial management systems and communication networks that managed corporate expense operations, affecting over $47 million in annual business spending, coordinated with luxury service providers across multiple countries, and maintained the secure connections, Fortune 500 systems that required advanced financial clearances and ongoing background investigations to ensure system integrity and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive corporate financial information that could affect major business partnerships and international corporate relationships. But beyond the physical infrastructure that supported my corporate financial operation, what my family completely failed to understand was that my daily routine represented the same level of financial expertise and business influence that had earned recognition from the Federal Financial Compliance Commission as one of the nation's most effective corporate expense coordinator, featured in Fortune 500 business journals and consulted by multiple international corporations seeking guidance on expense management integration, systems security, and financial protocols that balanced executive business needs with corporate accountability and fiduciary responsibility standards that protected both business efficiency and stakeholder interest. My morning schedule that my family observed during their infrequent visits included reviewing overnight corporate expense alerts that required investigation by federal financial agents, analyzing billing anomalies that might indicate expense fraud or unauthorized corporate activity involving Fortune 500 accounts, coordinating with federal financial investigators and corporate security specialists who needed immediate access to expense records for ongoing business investigation, and implementing security protocols that protected corporate financial privacy while ensuring federal agencies maintained effective access to information necessary for business fraud prevention and corporate compliance enforcement efforts throughout the international business community. The phone conversations that my family heard me conducting during their brief visits weren't just social calls with elderly colleagues. They were strategic consultations with Fortune 500 financial administrators who specialized in international corporate expense coordination, business officials who managed regulatory compliance for multinational corporate operations, and financial specialists who supervised system integration between corporate databases and federal networks that required constant monitoring and immediate response capabilities to maintain operational effectiveness and security standards that protected both corporate interests and regulatory compliance requirements. The typical retirement activities that my family witnessed during their visits were actually advanced corporate financial management techniques that I demonstrated through the Sullivan Corporate Financial Institute. Our exclusive Fortune 500 consultation program that prepared business executives and financial professionals for leadership positions in corporate expense management, business financial security, inter-corporate coordination, that required sophisticated understanding of federal business regulations, corporate law and financial systems, that determined how corporate expense databases served both business efficiency and regulatory compliance requirements. The Sullivan Institute was perhaps the most respected corporate financial consultation program in North America, accepting only 24 participants annually through an application process, more competitive than Harvard Business School, and requiring extensive experience in Fortune 500 financial management, corporate expense coordination, or business financial security administration before candidates qualified for consideration. Our program alumni included chief financial officers at major Fortune 500 corporations, federal coordinators who managed international business compliance systems, corporate financial security specialists at prestigious business agencies, and financial executives who managed corporate expense programs worth billions of dollars and affected business operations for hundreds of Fortune 500 companies throughout multiple countries and international business jurisdictions. For our intensive 12-month program, which included hands-on training in Fortune 500 expense integration, internships at our corporate coordination facilities, and personal mentorship from me and our network of business professionals who managed federal financial agencies and corporate security operations that coordinated expense authorization between local businesses, Fortune, and federal authorities, while maintaining fiduciary responsibility and corporate service standards that balanced business efficiency with individual corporate rights and due process requirements for expense management and regulatory compliance. The waiting list for admission to the Sullivan Institute extended over 4 years, and we regularly declined applications from financial executives at Fortune 100 technology companies who didn't meet our standards for corporate service, fiduciary awareness, and commitment to business financial management that distinguished our approach from profit sector expense coordination that prioritized efficiency and cost reduction over corporate service and fiduciary protections that should guide responsible business financial implementation and corporate expense administration. What made our program unique wasn't just the training quality, it was the Fortune 500 connections and career advancement opportunities that came with graduation from the most respected corporate financial education program in American business administration. Sullivan Institute graduates had automatic security clearance processing for Fortune 500 positions that never advertised openings, received personal recommendations from corporate financial officers and business security administrators, and could leverage our network of alumni and Fortune partners to build careers that would be impossible to achieve through traditional corporate employment and business advancement that didn't provide access to the highest levels of Fortune 500 financial management and corporate security coordination. My children's comfortable professional career, which they considered the result of personal achievement and individual competence, were actually dependent on clean expense records and regulatory compliance that existed because of systematic intervention and corporate financial management that I had been providing through my business authority, and Fortune 500 connections that had taken decades to establish through consistent excellence in corporate service and business financial administration that served both executive efficiency and regulatory compliance requirements. Patricia's marketing practice at Midwest Industrial Solutions, where she earned $188,000 annually as Senior Marketing Director and received executive track consideration that had allowed her to purchase a beautiful condo in downtown Chicago and maintain the professional reputation necessary for Fortune, was actually connected to our corporate expense network through professional relationships that I had cultivated with Fortune 500 marketing executives and business development officials who relied on accurate expense management for executive operations and corporate client relationship management. The professional network that had advanced Patricia's marketing career included Fortune 500 executives and corporate marketing directors who understood that our family represented access to corporate expense expertise and business financial coordination that could provide competitive in client development, regulatory compliance, and Fortune 500 business relationships that required sophisticated understanding of corporate financial systems and business expense law that most marketing professionals never encountered or mastered during their business education and professional development. Patricia's client success and Fortune 500 recognition were enhanced by her family's reputation within Illinois business community as representatives of effective corporate financial administration and expense management that maintained excellent accuracy records, regulatory compliant corporate service standards that distinguished our business financial systems from other corporate expense management that struggled with integration, system security, and administrative effectiveness. Michael's business development position at regional financial partner had grown from entry-level account management to senior business development manager, generating over $165,000 annually in combined salary and performance bonuses, had been supported through strategic relationships with Fortune 500 financial coordinators and corporate expense administrators who understood that financial services required integration with corporate expense databases for client verification, business fraud prevention, and regulatory compliance that determined banking operations and federal oversight requirements. The business partnerships that had established Michael's financial career success were funded through our Fortune 500 expense consultation programs that provided financial institutions with corporate integration expertise and regulatory compliance support while generating business development contracts and Fortune 500 coordination opportunities that served both private sector efficiency and corporate expense effectiveness throughout the banking and financial services industry. Michael's security clearance and professional recognition were enhanced by his family's connection to Fortune 500 expense administration and corporate financial coordination that provided him with insights into system integration and security protocols that distinguished his business development skills from other financial professionals who lacked understanding of corporate systems and Fortune 500 compliance requirements that determined which business projects received approval and regulatory support. David's luxury automotive sales position at Premier Motors annually as senior sales executive and managed multi-million-dollar luxury vehicle campaigns for high-end automotive manufacturers throughout the Chicago metropolitan area, had been supported through automotive industry relationships and corporate expense expertise that I had coordinated through our luxury service liaison programs that provided automotive businesses with regulatory compliance support and expense coordination necessary for corporate vehicle sales and business expense processing. The automotive industry partnerships that had advanced David's sales career included vehicle manufacturers and automotive executives who understood that our family represented access to corporate expense expertise and Fortune 500 coordination that could provide competitive advantages in executive vehicle sales, expense processing, and regulatory compliance that required sophisticated understanding of business expense law and administrative procedures that determined which automotive businesses received preferred status and expedited processing for their corporate client transactions. David's professional success and industry recognition were enhanced by his family's reputation within Illinois automotive community as representatives of effective Fortune 500 administration and corporate expense management that maintained
excellent customer service standard, accurate financial record keeping, and regulatory compliance that distinguished Illinois business expense systems from other corporate financial management that struggled with luxury service coordination and corporate expense efficiency.
Sometimes the most important lesson you can teach ungrateful family members is that corporate expense, expertise, and Fortune 500 financial authority aren't family entitlements available for career advancement and professional networking, but specialized resources that belong to elderly individuals who have earned the right to determine how their life's work protects future generations based on demonstrated appreciation, family loyalty, and respect for traditional values that require personal sacrifice and emotional investment, rather than efficient coordination and convenient family management. My children would soon learn that elderly mothers who appear to need assistance with routine business travel may actually control corporate expense systems affecting hundreds of Fortune 500 companies, possess the financial authority to enhance or destroy professional reputations, and maintain administrative power to determine whether young professionals deserve continued regulatory protection or should experience the full complexity of corporate expense systems without family advocacy based on their treatment of elderly relatives and respect for traditional family values, distinguish responsible corporate service from routine business processing. The conference trip that seemed like an opportunity for my family to prioritize professional activities would become the most expensive lesson of their lives about the true cost of elderly dismissal, family disrespect, entitled assumptions toward women whose expense expertise and Fortune 500 authority they couldn't comprehend or respect until their corporate privileges disappeared and their professional lives became complicated by expense problems that most business professionals never experience or resolve without extensive financial consultation and administrative advocacy. They left me at the gas station on the highway, so I called a limo and charged it to them. Part 3. The Antagonist's Introduction and Fatal Misreading. The first clear indication that my family viewed my Milwaukee conference attendance request as an elderly burden rather than a reasonable professional opportunity came during our family video call in late September, just 2 weeks before my October 14th business trip, and 10 days before their corporate expense privileges would be systematically dismantled through financial actions that they could never have imagined or prepared for. What initially seemed like natural family coordination and supportive travel planning gradually revealed itself as systematic evaluation of my business capabilities and professional dependencies that my successful children could manage through efficient obligation fulfillment and minimal time investment, rather than understanding that they were discussing logistics with these women whose Fortune 500 expense authority had been quietly protecting their corporate financial standings, professional reputations, and business compliance for over 15 years of administrative advocacy and regulatory intervention. My daughter Patricia, who had built a marketing career at Midwest Industrial Solutions on client relationships and campaign success that she believed represented her own strategic expertise and individual achievement, approached our family planning with the analytical methodology of someone managing competing business demands, rather than supporting elderly family members through routine professional travel and demonstrating appreciation for the corporate expense authority that had created her professional advantages and regulatory compliance throughout her marketing education and career development. Mom, we need to coordinate your Milwaukee conference logistics to ensure everything goes smoothly and you have the business support you might need during this process, Patricia announced during our video conference, speaking with the diplomatic efficiency of someone managing elderly care requirements while attempting to minimize personal disruption and professional scheduling conflicts that interfered with her own marketing deadlines and client presentation responsibility. It's going to be important that we handle this systematically so you don't feel overwhelmed by modern business systems and conference procedures that might be confusing for someone who isn't familiar with contemporary corporate technology and digital networking platforms. But Patricia's reference to business support and concerns about me feeling overwhelmed by modern business systems revealed the systematic assumptions that had been developing throughout our family discussions, where successful professionals had gradually positioned themselves as business guides and decision makers for an elderly relative they considered professionally confused and technologically dependent, rather than understanding that they were offering assistance to the woman whose corporate innovations had revolutionized Fortune 500 expense management throughout North America and whose business coordination expertise had been featured in international corporate publications and Fortune 500 strategy journals. We've been researching the current conference formats, and it looks like everything is digital now, with online registration, electronic network and computer-based presentation systems. Patricia continued while obviously reviewing notes and preparation materials that treated my conference attendance like a senior business management project, rather than recognizing that routine professional travel represented opportunities to demonstrate gratitude and respect for elderly relatives whose corporate achievements had created opportunities for younger generations' professional success and regulatory compliance. There are a lot of technological requirements and digital networking procedures that might be difficult to navigate without assistance from people who understand contemporary business systems and corporate technology platform. Patricia's assumption that I would need assistance with digital networking procedures and her emphasis on contemporary business systems revealed her fundamental misreading of my capabilities and experience, treating routine conference attendance like elderly accommodation, understanding that my business trip represented final professional coordination for someone whose corporate expense management expertise had trained thousands of Fortune 500 executives and whose financial innovations had been adopted by international corporations as models for global business expense integration and security protocols. My son Michael, whose business development career at Regional Financial Partners had been protected through strategic expense coordination and corporate clearance maintenance, that he considered evidence of his exceptional relationship management skills and professional competence, contributed to our family planning with suggestions that revealed his belief that elderly relatives should be managed through business assistance and professional guidance, rather than respected for their corporate achievements and expense expertise that had created opportunities for younger family members in financial services business development. We should probably walk through the digital conference requirements beforehand and make sure Mom understands the online business systems and corporate networking interfaces she'll encounter. Michael suggested while reviewing his business development protocols and client management strategies that apparently took priority over family appreciation and elderly respect. Corporate conferences can be really confusing for older business professionals who aren't comfortable with modern networking platforms, and we want to make sure she doesn't get frustrated or make mistakes that could delay her sessions or create complications with conference coordination. Michael's suggestion that we should walk through digital conference requirements revealed his systematic patronization of my business capabilities, treating normal professional procedures like complex technological challenges, rather than understanding that my conference attendance represent routine business completion by someone who had personally designed corporate systems that he used in his financial services work without realizing their origin or sophisticated architecture that required both technical expertise and Fortune 500 security clearance to implement and make. I'm thinking we should establish some kind of backup support system and maybe download the necessary conference materials ahead of time so Mom can review them at home, where she's more comfortable with familiar technology. Michael continued while obviously consulting his business project management guidelines and client support protocols that treated elderly family members like customer service cases, rather than understanding that family professional transitions required emotional support and practical assistance, rather than business training and digital literacy coordination. Michael's approach revealed his fundamental assumption that elderly relatives represented business challenges, rather than family relationships that required personal investment and emotional commitment from successful professionals who had benefited from elderly relatives' corporate expertise and expense management throughout their educational development and career advancement that most business development managers never received from their families or professional networks. My youngest son, David, whose additional luxury automotive sales position at Premier Motors Chicago and high-end vehicle campaign management had been supported through corporate expense relationships and business coordination that he attributed to his exceptional sales competence and industry network, approached our family planning with recommendations that revealed his belief that elderly relatives should be accommodated through simplified procedures rather than respected for their professional expertise and industry authority that had created automotive career opportunities for family members. We should focus on making Mom's conference experience as simple and efficient as possible, David suggested, while reviewing his sales schedule and automotive industry responsibilities that apparently took priority over family support and elderly appreciation. Elderly people often struggle with business conferences and professional networking procedures, so we should minimize complexity and make sure everything is organized for quick processing and minimal confusion during registration and session attendance. David's suggestion that we should minimize complexity and organize for quick processing revealed his assumption that elderly relatives required simplified experiences rather than understanding that my conference attendance represented routine professional completion by someone whose corporate expense expertise and business coordination had created the professional relationships and regulatory knowledge that distinguished his automotive sales career from other luxury vehicle professionals who lacked similar family connections and industry access. Maybe we could arrange for special conference assistance or professional accommodation so Mom doesn't have to deal with complicated networking sessions and complex business presentation formats. David continued while making notes about elderly business services and professional coordination that treated family transitions like dependency management rather than understanding that capable business professionals required family respect and emotional support rather than special accommodation and customer service intervention. But David's focus on special conference assistance and professional accommodation demonstrated his complete misunderstanding of my situation and capabilities. Treating conference attendance like elderly incapacity rather than recognizing that my business trip represented final official professional action by someone whose industry relationships and regulatory expertise had been supporting his automotive sales career through corporate partnerships and business authority that most sales executives could never achieve or comprehend. The pattern that emerged during our family planning conversations revealed that my children had internalized assumptions about elderly business confusion and professional dependency that led them to approach my conference attendance as a digital literacy project, rather than understanding that they were discussing logistics with a woman whose corporate expertise and Fortune 500 coordination authority had created the professional opportunities and regulatory advantages that distinguished their careers from typical marketing, business development, and sales professional families who lacked similar administrative connections and corporate relationships. Patricia's marketing success, Michael's business development advancement, and David's automotive sales achievement all represented accomplishments that they considered evidence of personal competence and professional excellence, rather than understanding that their career trajectories reflected systematic family support and corporate advocacy that had created educational opportunities, professional connection, and regulatory compliance that required family loyalty and gratitude, rather than treating elderly relatives like business assistants' obligations and management responsibilities. But the most revealing aspect of my family's approach to conference planning was their assumption that my business trip represented elderly need for family guidance, rather than understanding that routine professional travel provided opportunities for successful children to demonstrate appreciation for the elderly relative whose corporate expense empire and Fortune 500 relationships had created the foundation of their comfortable professional lives
and regulatory standing within Illinois marketing, financial services, and automotive industries. They treated conference coordination like elderly accommodation, rather than recognizing that family support represented privileges that should be honored, personal sacrifice, and emotional investment, rather than efficient management and convenient scheduling that minimized time requirements and obligation demands while maintaining the appearance of family consideration and business assistance. "We definitely want to make sure you feel supported during this conference," Patricia had said with the diplomatic sympathy of someone providing business consultation rather than expressing genuine appreciation for family relationships and corporate achievement. "It's important that you don't feel confused or frustrated, especially when you're dealing with digital business systems and professional networking procedures that can be challenging for people who aren't familiar with contemporary corporate technology and online business platforms." Patricia's reference to feeling confused or frustrated revealed her assumption that elderly relatives needed family guidance for emotional support rather than understanding that business conferences represented opportunities for successful family members to honor the elderly relatives whose corporate work had created their professional opportunities and regulatory compliance through Fortune 500 expense authority and business coordination expertise. "We know how complicated these corporate conference systems can be," Michael had added with the patronizing kindness of someone providing business consultation rather than demonstrating genuine respect for family achievements and corporate expertise. "Digital networking platforms and online professional procedures can be overwhelming for older business professionals, and it's important that you have adequate technical support and assistance during this transition to new conference systems." Michael's suggestion that digital systems were overwhelming for older business professionals demonstrated his complete misunderstanding of my technical capabilities and professional background, treating routine conference procedures like business challenges rather than understanding family support represented opportunities for younger generations to demonstrate gratitude for the elderly relatives whose corporate innovations had made their comfortable careers possible through Fortune 500 administration and business expense integration. "The most important thing is making sure you're comfortable and have everything you need to complete this conference successfully," David had commented with polite concern that revealed his assumption that elderly relatives required procedural guidance rather than understanding that family support represented meaningful opportunities for respect demonstration and appreciation expression. "We want to make sure this business trip goes smoothly and gives you the professional confidence and networking success you deserve when dealing with corporate systems and conference requirements." But David's reference to professional confidence revealed his fundamental failure to understand that my conference attendance wasn't about elderly accommodation, but routine business completion by someone whose corporate authority and Fortune 500 relationships would determine whether his automotive sales career continued benefiting from industry connections and business partnerships, or failed the regulatory complications and professional isolation that most sales executives experienced when their family advantages disappeared. The October family meeting continued with detailed coordination of conference logistics and business assistance planning, but what became increasingly clear that my children had collectively decided that my Milwaukee trip represented elderly digital literacy support that successful professionals could manage through systematic planning and efficient coordination, rather than understanding that business conferences provided opportunities to honor corporate expense expert whose Fortune 500 relationships and administrative authority had been supporting their comfortable careers and regulatory compliance for over 15 years. "So, we're thinking conference coordination from maybe Thursday evening through Sunday afternoon would work well for everyone's schedule." Patricia summarized with obvious satisfaction that elderly obligations could be contained within a specific time frame that wouldn't interfere with professional responsibilities and client meetings that apparently took priority over extended family support and conference assistance.
That would give us time for family travel coordination while maintaining schedule flexibility for our other business commitments and professional obligations. Michael agreed with obvious relief that elderly assistance could be minimized through collective agreement and systematic limitation rather than requiring the personal sacrifice and emotional investment that meaningful family support typically demanded from successful professionals who had benefited from elderly relatives, corporate expertise and fortune. But their systematic coordination of minimal conference assistance revealed that my family had fundamentally multinational the nature of family relationships and generational respect, treating elderly relatives like business support obligations, rather than understanding that professional conferences represented opportunities for successful children to demonstrate appreciation for the elderly relatives whose corporate work had created their professional opportunities and regulatory advantages through decades of expense management and Fortune 500 coordination. To my October 14th conference brought a series of coordination calls and preparation meetings that revealed the systematic nature of my family's approach to minimal business assistance and their collective effort to manage elderly obligations through efficient scheduling and convenient timing that preserved their professional priorities while maintaining the appearance of family consideration and digital literacy support. Mom, I just wanted to confirm our Milwaukee conference coordination plan and make sure you've reviewed the digital networking procedures we discussed. Patricia called to announce on October 7th, speaking with obvious relief that family obligations had been successfully organized into manageable business assistance that wouldn't interfere with her marketing practice responsibilities and client presentation scheduling. Patricia's confirmation call revealed her assumption that family conferences should accommodate professional schedules rather than understanding that elderly relatives deserved personal sacrifice and time investment that demonstrated respect for corporate achievements and expense expertise that couldn't be optimized through convenient coordination and strategic time management methods. I'm really looking forward to helping with the technological aspects and making sure you understand the digital conference systems, Michael called to confirm on October 10th, obviously pleased that family assistance could be contained within specific business support parameters that wouldn't interfere with his business development responsibilities and client relationship deadlines that he considered more important than extended family support and elderly conference assistance. Michael's enthusiasm for time-limited business participation revealed his systematic approach to elderly obligation management, treating family relatives like customer support appointments, rather than understanding that meaningful conference support required emotional investment and personal commitment that demonstrated appreciation for the expense expert whose Fortune 500 coordination had made his financial services career security clearance possible. Milwaukee conference coordination is going to work perfectly with my automotive industry schedule. David called to announce on October 12th, obviously satisfied that family conferences had been adjusted to accommodate his sales responsibilities and client obligations that took priority over traditional family gathering and elderly business participation. David's satisfaction with coordinated family assistance revealed his assumption that elderly relatives should adapt their professional needs to accommodate younger family schedules, rather than understanding that business conferences represented opportunities for successful automotive sales professionals to demonstrate gratitude to elderly relatives whose corporate expense relationships and regulatory expertise had created their career advancement and professional recognition. But the most revealing aspect of their individual confirmation calls was the obvious coordination and mutual support that had occurred among family members who had collectively agreed that my conference attendance represented manageable elderly business assistance that successful professionals could handle through systematic planning and efficient coordination, rather than understanding that professional conferences provided opportunity to demonstrate appreciation for the elderly relatives whose expense authority had been protecting their regulatory compliance for decades. October 14th, Conference Departure Day,
brought the final revelation of my family's true approach to elderly support and their systematic method of managing family obligations through convenient assistance that would trigger consequences they could never have imagined or prepared for. Instead of arriving early for conference coordination as planned, I received a series of calls that revealed their ultimate prioritization of professional activities over family relationships and elderly appreciation.
Mom, I'm so sorry, but an urgent marketing crisis came up that requires immediate client presentation. Patricia called at 7:30 a.m., just 1 hour before their scheduled arrival time. I have to handle this Fortune 500 client emergency that can't be postponed, but I'll try to coordinate business assistance later if my marketing schedule allows, and the client crisis concludes early enough. Patricia's urgent marketing crisis represented the final step in her systematic family avoidance, using professional emergency language to justify abandoning elderly conference support while preserving her self-image as a dedicated marketing director, rather than acknowledging that she was choosing client obligations over family relationships and traditional elderly respect during routine professional travel. Really sorry, Mom, but critical business development emergency required at the financial firm. Obviously coordinating with other family members to ensure that their collective conference abandonment appeared to result from unavoidable professional obligations, rather than systematic family avoidance and deliberate dismissal of elderly relatives and traditional family values. Michael, critical business development emergency, provided convenient justification for conference abandonment while maintaining his professional reputation and avoiding direct accountability for choosing financial project obligations over family support and traditional elderly assistance during routine business conferences that required family transportation and moral support. Unexpected automotive industry crisis, can't make Milwaukee conference, David called at 8 a.m., using sales emergency language to justify his conference abandonment while preserving his self-image as a dedicated automotive professional, rather than acknowledging that he was prioritizing client responsibilities over family relationships and elderly conference support during professional transitions. David's automotive industry crisis represented systematic excuse coordination with other family members had collectively decided that conference abandonment could be justified through professional obligation language, rather than acknowledging their fundamental lack of appreciation for elderly relatives and traditional family values that required personal sacrifice during business conferences. Professional procedures. By 8:30 a.m., on conference departure day, 30 minutes past their scheduled arrival time, every family member had abandoned my Milwaukee business trip through coordinated professional excuses that revealed their systematic planning and mutual support for avoiding obligations and elderly support, while maintaining their collective self-image as successful professionals with unavoidable commitments, rather than acknowledging their systematic dismissal of elderly relatives and corporate expertise that deserved family respect and appreciation. The decision to drive alone to Milwaukee, which I had never intended to make, became a 4.5-hour journey that provided extensive time for reflection about family priorities and character evaluation that would determine their continued access to corporate expense privileges and regulatory protection. The highway travel that my children had abandoned me to manage independently represented their final demonstration of character and family priorities that would determine their access to expense protection and business advocacy. The gas station stop at the Illinois-Wisconsin border, which occurred approximately 2 hours into my solitary drive at 11:15 a.m., was planned as a routine bathroom break and fuel stop before continuing to Milwaukee for afternoon conference registration and evening networking activities. The modest travel center, located along Interstate 94 about 30 miles south of Milwaukee, appeared unremarkable. Standard fuel pumps, convenience, and basic travel amenities that thousands of business travelers used daily during routine professional trips
throughout the Midwest business corridor. But what my children didn't understand was that this seemingly routine gas station stop would become the location where their systematic family abandonment and elderly dismissal would trigger the most expensive corporate financial consequences of their lives, initiated by the woman they had dismissed as a confused elderly relatives who needed business assistance, rather than recognizing the Fortune 500 expense authority, whose corporate billing authorization could transform their comfortable professional lives into expensive business complications that most executives never experience, resolve without extensive financial consultation and corporate relationship management. The abandonment that my children justified through professional emergency coordination represented their final demonstration of character and family priorities that would determine their access to corporate expense protection and business advocacy. The woman they had left to travel alone to her business conference controlled enough Fortune 500 authority and expense access to determine whether their corporate privileges remained intact, whether their professional reputations survived regulatory scrutiny, whether their comfortable business operations continued without bureaucratic complications that could affect their daily professional lives and career activity.
But my children approached conference abandonment with the confident assumption that their professional achievements were self-made and their corporate expense privileges were permanent, rather than understanding that their remarkable regulatory compliance required continued family loyalty and respect for the elderly relative whose expense expertise had created the foundation for every advantage and opportunity they considered evidence of individual merit and personal achievement in competitive professional markets that demanded both technical competence and clean regulatory records from sustained career advancement and professional recognition. The conference day they had collectively abandoned would become the beginning of consequences that would teach my ungrateful family that elderly relatives who appear to need business assistance may actually control corporate expense systems, affecting hundreds of Fortune possess the financial authority to enhance or destroy professional reputations through regulatory action, and maintain the administrative power to determine whether younger generations deserve continued regulatory protection based on demonstrated appreciation, loyalty, and respect for the elderly relatives whose corporate achievements had made their comfortable lives possible through decades of expense management and Fortune 500 coordination that required family gratitude rather than professional convenience and elderly dismissal. The gas station abandonment that would change everything happened exactly as my children had coordinated me to experience alone, but what they didn't realize was that this wasn't just Margaret Sullivan stranded at a highway rest stop. This was senior financial operations consultant Sullivan activating her final corporate expense authorization protocols with Fortune 500 billing access that could instantly transform their comfortable business lives into financial nightmares that would cost them tens of thousands of dollars, weeks of corporate investigation, and professional embarrassment that their careers might never recover from completely. Standing at the ExxonMobil Travel Center at 11:15 a.m. on October 14, I wasn't experiencing elderly abandonment. I was documenting the character evidence and family betrayal that would justify the most comprehensive corporate expense retaliation in Fortune 500 history. Seemingly routine gas station with its standard fuel pumps and basic convenience would become ground zero for systematic financial justice that would teach my ungrateful children that elderly mothers who appear stranded and helpless may actually control corporate billing systems worth $47 million and possess the authorization codes to make their professional lives incredibly expensive. But before implementing the corporate financial consequences that would devastate their comfortable business operations, I needed to complete one final verification of their character and family priorities by offering them a reasonable opportunity to demonstrate basic human decency, family loyalty that could have prevented the expensive lesson they were about to receive about respecting elderly relatives whose corporate authority they had completely underestimated and dismissed. My first call went to Patricia at 11:20 a.m. 5 minutes after arriving at the gas station, realizing that my planned bathroom break had become an opportunity to test whether successful marketing directors valued family relationships more than client presentations and professional convenience during elderly emergencies and family crisis situations. Patricia, I'm at the gas station and my car won't start, I announced calmly, providing her with a simple opportunity to demonstrate family loyalty and elderly respect by offering immediate assistance to the mother whose corporate expense authority had been protecting her marketing career for over 15 years. I'm about 30 miles south of Milwaukee and I need family assistance to get to my conference registration. Patricia's response revealed the systematic nature of her family priorities and professional values in ways that would determine her continued access to corporate expense protection and regulatory advocacy that she had never appreciated or understood. "Oh, Mom, that's really unfortunate timing," Patricia replied with obvious irritation and scheduling frustration rather than family concern or elderly assistance priority. "I'm in the middle of this critical Fortune 500 client presentation that can't be interrupted, and my marketing schedule is completely packed through the weekend with deadlines that determine my quarterly performance reviews and professional advancement opportunities." Patricia's referenced unfortunate timing and her emphasis on client presentations that can't be interrupted revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of family emergency priorities and elderly assistance obligations that distinguished responsible children from entitled professionals who prioritized career advancement over basic human decency and family loyalty during crisis situations. "I know you understand how important these marketing projects are for my professional reputation," Patricia continued with patronizing sympathy that treated elderly car trouble like minor inconvenience rather than family emergency requiring immediate assistance and personal sacrifice. "Maybe you could call AAA or find some local automotive assistance. I'm sure there are highway services that can help elderly drivers with mechanical problems and transportation coordination." Patricia's suggestion that I should call AAA and find local automotive assistance demonstrated her complete failure to understand that family emergencies required personal involvement and emotional support, rather than customer service referrals and elderly accommodation that avoided family obligation and personal inconvenience during professional activities that she considered more important than elderly relatives and traditional family values. "I really wish I could help, but my client obligations have to take priority," Patricia concluded with obvious relief that elderly problems could be delegated to commercial services rather than requiring personal sacrifice and family assistance that might interfere with her marketing career and professional advancement, that she valued more than family relationships and elderly providing him with an identical opportunity to demonstrate whether business development managers understood that family loyalty and elderly assistance took priority over financial services and client relationship management during emergency situations and family crisis. "My car broke down at the gas station and I need family help getting to Milwaukee," I explained simply, offering him the chance to prove that successful financial professionals valued family relationships more than business development projects and client meeting schedules during elderly emergencies. Michael's response confirmed the pattern of family priorities and character values that would justify the corporate expense consequences they were about to experience through systematic financial retaliation and Fortune 500 billing authorization that would teach them expensive lessons about respecting elderly relatives and maintaining traditional family values. "Mom, this is really bad timing," Michael announced with business-focused frustration rather than family concern or emergency assistance priority. "I'm coordinating this massive financial partnership deal that requires immediate attention and continuous client management throughout the weekend. These Fortune 500 relationships determine my career advancement and professional reputation within the financial services industry." Michael's emphasis on bad timing and financial partnerships that required immediate attention revealed his systematic prioritization of business activities over family emergencies and elderly assistance that required personal sacrifice and emotional commitment rather than professional convenience and career advancement. "You know how critical these business development projects are for maintaining client relationships and expanding our financial services portfolio." Michael continued with patronizing business sympathy that treated family family car trouble like scheduling inconvenience rather than elderly emergency requiring immediate family response and personal assistance. I'm sure you can figure out some alternative transportation solution. Maybe there's a shuttle service or taxi company that provides elderly transportation assistance. Michael's suggestion about alternative transportation solutions and elderly taxi services demonstrated his fundamental failure to understand that family emergencies required personal involvement and family loyalty rather than commercial service recommendations that avoided family obligation and personal inconvenience during business activities that he considered more important than elderly relatives and emergency assistance. I really can't leave this financial coordination project. Michael concluded with obvious business priority satisfaction and elderly problems could be resolved through commercial services rather than requiring family sacrifice and personal assistance that might compromise his business development activities and client relationship management. Determined his professional success and career advancement. My third and final call went to David at 11:30 a.m. providing my youngest son with the ultimate opportunity to demonstrate whether luxury automotive sales executives understood basic family values and elderly assistance priorities during emergency situations that tested character and family loyalty more than business convenience and professional scheduling. David, I'm stranded at a gas station with car trouble and I need immediate family assistance, I stated clearly, offering him the final chance to prove that successful automotive professionals valued family relationships more than sales activities and client obligations during elderly emergencies and family crisis situations. Administration that would justify the comprehensive corporate expense retaliation they were about to experience through systematic financial consequences and Fortune 500 billing authorization that would transform their comfortable professional lives into expensive business complications. Mom, this is incredibly inconvenient timing. David replied with sales-focused irritation rather than family emergency concern or elderly assistance priority. I'm managing this huge luxury automotive campaign that requires constant client coordination and premium service delivery throughout the weekend. These high-end automotive relationships determine my sales success and industry reputation within the luxury vehicle market. David's reference incredibly inconvenient timing and luxury automotive campaigns that required constant client coordination revealed his systematic prioritization of sales activities over family emergencies and elderly assistance that required personal sacrifice and family loyalty rather than professional convenience and career advancement. You understand how important these automotive industry relationships are for my professional advancement and sales performance. David continued with patronizing automotive sympathy that treated elderly car trouble like business scheduling conflict rather than family emergency requiring immediate personal response and assist. I'm sure you can arrange some kind of commercial transportation or automotive assistance service. There must be highway support services that help elderly drivers with mechanical problems and travel coordination. Services demonstrated his complete failure to understand that family emergencies required personal involvement and emotional commitment, rather than customer service referrals that avoided family obligation and personal sacrifice during sales activities that he considered more important than elderly relatives and family emergency assistance that might interfere with his sales activities and client relationship management. That determined his automotive career success and industry recognition. By 11:35 a.m. on October 14, 2023, standing alone at the Illinois-Wisconsin border gas station, I had received comprehensive documentation of my children's character, family priorities and fundamental values that justified the corporate expense consequences they were about to experience through systematic financial retaliation and fortune. Most expensive lesson of their lives about respecting elderly relatives and maintaining family loyalty during emergency situations. The systematic abandonment that my children had coordinated through professional excuse language revealed their true character and family values in ways that determined their continued access to corporate expense protection and regulatory advocacy that they had never appreciated, understood, or respected during 15 years of family financial support and business assistance. But their abandonment also activated my access to corporate expense authorization systems and Fortune 500 billing protocols that would implement immediate financial consequences for their demonstrated character and family priority failures during elderly emergency situations that required basic human decency and family loyalty rather than professional convenience and elderly dismissal. The first corporate expense action that I implemented was immediate authorization of luxury transportation services through Elite Executive Limousine, the premier Fortune 500 corporate transportation provider that served Fortune 500 executives and business professionals throughout the Midwest business corridor. The luxury limousine service that I authorized included premium sedan transportation with executive amenities, professional chauffeur service, luxury refreshment coordination, and expedited travel coordination that would transport me to Milwaukee in style while generating substantial billing charges against my children's corporate expense accounts and business credit line. The Elite Executive Limousine authorization that I processed through my corporate expense system included Patricia's Midwest Industrial Solutions corporate account for $1,200, unmarketing transportation charges, Michael's Regional Financial Partners business expense account for Murted and Financial Services transportation billing, and David's Premier Motors Chicago Automotive expense account for $200 in immediate corporate billing that would trigger expense investigation and regulatory review procedures within their respective business organizations and professional compliance department. The luxury limousine coordination included an premium champagne service, gourmet catering coordination, executive business amenities, and professional transportation management that distinguished Fortune 500 executive travel from routine business transportation and commercial service provider. The comprehensive luxury service package reflected my corporate authority and expense authorization privileges, while generating substantial billing charges that would require immediate explanation and corporate approval from my children's business organizations and professional management. The luxury transportation authorization represented only the beginning of comprehensive corporate expense consequences that would systematically dismantle their comfortable business financial privileges and professional regulatory protection through Fortune 500 billing systems and management protocols that would teach them expensive lessons about family loyalty and elderly respect that their character demonstration had proven they needed to learn through financial consequences and professional embarrassment. The second corporate expense action involved systematic reversal of protective expense management and regulatory advocacy that I had been providing through Fortune 500 coordination and business financial intervention for over 15 years of family support and professional protection. The expense account modifications that I implemented would restore original billing patterns, reinstate delayed penalty assessments, and remove administrative accommodations that had been preventing normal corporate consequences for business expense violations and regulatory compliance failure. Patricia's expense account restoration revealed 15 years of marketing conference overcharges, luxury service billing irregularities, and corporate expense violations that had been quietly resolved through my Fortune 500 coordination and business regulatory advocacy. The comprehensive expense pattern that emerged from her corrected financial records showed systematic abuse of corporate travel privileges, unauthorized luxury service utilization, and business expense fraud that would trigger immediate corporate investigation and professional disciplinary procedures within Midwest Industrial Solutions and their Fortune 500 client organization. 500 in unauthorized luxury hotel upgrades during corporate conferences, $12,300 in premium transportation billing that exceeded company policy limitations, $8,700 in luxury dining and entertainment expenses that violated corporate entertainment guidelines, $200 in personal expense charges that had been inappropriately billed to corporate marketing accounts and business development programs throughout her marketing career advancement and professional development activities. Michael's business expense account corrections
revealed systematic financial services billing violations and corporate expense fraud that had been concealed through my Fortune 500 coordination and regulatory intervention. Throughout his business development, career advancement, and professional relationship management, the comprehensive financial pattern that emerged showed deliberate abuse of corporate expense privileges, unauthorized business entertainment billing, and financial services expense fraud that would trigger immediate corporate investigation and professional licensing review within regional financial partners and their federal compliance oversight agencies. The business development expense violations that I documented: 400 in unauthorized luxury business entertainment that exceeded corporate policy limitations, $15,600 in premium travel billing that violated financial services compliance guidelines, $11,800 in luxury service charges that had been inappropriately billed to corporate client development account, and $8,300 in personal financial services that had been fraudulently charged to business expense accounts throughout his financial career advancement and client relationship development activities. David's automotive expense account restoration revealed comprehensive luxury automotive expense fraud and corporate billing violations that had been systematically concealed through my Fortune 500 coordination and business regulatory advocacy. Throughout his sales career advancement and luxury automotive industry professional development, the expense pattern documentation showed deliberate abuse of automotive industry expense privileges, unauthorized luxury service billing, and sales expense fraud that would trigger immediate corporate investigation and automotive industry regulatory review within Premier Motors Chicago and their luxury automotive and manufacturer oversight organizations. The luxury automotive expense violations that I documented: 700 in unauthorized premium vehicle utilization that exceeded automotive industry guidelines, $17,200 in luxury service billing that violated corporate automotive policies, $13,400 in premium entertainment expenses that had been inappropriately charged to automotive marketing accounts, and 600 in personal luxury services that had been fraudulently billed to corporate automotive expense accounts throughout his sales career advancement and luxury automotive client relationship management activities. The third comprehensive corporate expense action involved implementation, monitoring protocols, and regulatory oversight coordination that would subject my children's future business activities to systematic scrutiny and immediate enforcement of all corporate compliance requirements. Without administrative accommodation or family advocacy intervention, monitoring systems that I activated would ensure that any future expense violations resulted in standard business consequences and regulatory procedures that most corporate professionals experienced when navigating expense management systems. Without professional guidance or administrative protection, the enhanced monitoring protocols included automatic notification to corporate compliance departments when flagged expense accounts were utilized, requiring immediate authorization, verification, and expense documentation before corporate approval could continue. Business utilization would trigger comprehensive account review and violation history analysis that could reveal administrative irregularities and billing complications, requiring immediate resolution through proper corporate channels and compliance procedures that most business professionals never encountered during routine expense management and corporate financial coordination. The monitoring system would coordinate with Fortune 500 compliance agencies and professional licensing authorities to ensure that corporate expense violations and administrative non-compliance were properly reported and evaluated for employment impact, professional licensing review, and business relationship consequences that my administrative protection had been preventing through systematic intervention and regulatory advocacy that most business professionals never received or could afford. Through private financial consultation and corporate expense management services, But perhaps the most devastating aspect of the corporate expense consequences was the implementation of systematic billing coordination with their employers' chief financial officers and corporate compliance departments that would require immediate explanation and professional accountability. The luxury transportation charges and expense account irregularities that had been discovered through routine expense management audit and regulatory compliance review procedure. During her Fortune 500 client presentation, when Midwest Industrial Solutions Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Morrison called to request immediate explanation, 200 luxury transportation charge that had been billed to her marketing expense account and required immediate corporate approval and expense documentation before the transaction could be processed through their corporate financial systems. Patricia, we need immediate explanation for a luxury limousine charge that appeared on your corporate expense account today, CFO Morrison announced during Patricia's client presentation, interrupting her marketing activities with corporate financial investigation that revealed the extent of her expense account violations and regulatory non-compliance. This $1,200 transportation charge exceeds our corporate policy limitations and requires immediate explanation and documentation before we can approve this expense through our corporate financial system. Patricia's shock and confusion during her client presentation revealed her immediate understanding that her comfortable expense privileges and regulatory protection had disappeared, replaced by corporate investigation and financial scrutiny that would require extensive documentation and professional explanation for expense patterns that had been quietly managed through my Fortune 500 coordination and family advocacy. Michael received his corporate expense notification at 2:30 p.m. during his financial partnership coordination meeting, when Regional Financial Partners Compliance Director Robert Chen called to request immediate explanation for the 100 business transportation charge that had triggered automatic expense review and regulatory investigation within their financial services compliance department and federal oversight coordination. We have concerns about a business transportation charge that exceeded our expense policy guidelines, Compliance Director Chen announced during Michael's client coordination, interrupting his financial activities with corporate compliance investigation that revealed the systematic nature of his expense violations and regulatory non-comply. This $1,100 expense charge requires immediate explanation and threatens your financial services, professional licensing, and federal compliance clearance. Michael's professional panic during his client meeting revealed his immediate recognition that his comfortable business financial standing, regulatory protection, had been replaced by compliance investigation and federal scrutiny that could affect his financial services career advancement and professional licensing that required clean expense records and regulatory compliance. David received his corporate expense notification at 2:45 p.m. during his luxury automotive client coordination, when Premier Motors Chicago General Manager Sandra Martinez called to request immediate explanation for the $900 automotive transportation charge that had triggered automatic review and luxury automotive industry regulatory investigation within their corporate compliance department and manufacturer oversight coordination. General Manager Martinez announced during David's client coordination, interrupting his sales activities with corporate investigation that revealed his systematic expense violations and regulatory non-compliance. This $900 transportation charge threatens your automotive industry professional standing and manufacturer relationship coordination, been replaced by corporate investigation and manufacturer scrutiny that could affect his luxury automotive sales coordination professional. The immediate corporate consequences of their expense account investigations began affecting their professional reputations and career advancement within hours of implementation, as routine business operations became complicated corporate procedures requiring extensive documentation, compliance review, and professional explanation that interfered with their work schedules and client relationship management in ways they had never experienced or anticipated during their protected careers and family-supported professional development. Patricia discovered that her marketing client presentations required corporate compliance coordination and expense account verification that affected her client relationships and professional credibility, while her corporate expense violations triggered comprehensive audit procedures that could result in marketing career termination and professional industry blacklisting. Based on her documented pattern of expense fraud and regulatory non-compliance, Michael found that his financial services activities required federal compliance review and professional licensing investigation of his business expense violations and corporate irregularity, potentially affecting his financial career advancement and professional certification that had been protected through my Fortune 500 coordination and regulatory advocacy throughout his business development career and client relation. David learned that his automotive sales position required industry compliance review and manufacturer investigation of his luxury automotive expense violations and corporate billing irregularity, potentially affecting his employment status and industry credibility that had been maintained through my corporate expense expertise and automotive industry coordination throughout his sales career advancement and luxury client relation. The professional and financial costs associated with resolving their corporate expense complications began accumulating immediately, as each family member required private business attorney consultation, corporate compliance and professional licensing defense that charged hundreds of dollars per hour for services that I had been providing without compensation or recognition for over 15 years of family support and regulatory advocacy.
But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of their corporate expense crisis was the growing realization that their comfortable professional lives and regulatory compliance had been entirely dependent on corporate expertise and Fortune 500 authority that they had dismissed, abandoned, and disrespected during the most important business transition of my corporate career, revealing character flaws and family values that determined their access to future assistance and administrative advocacy should opportunities for reconciliation ever arise. Meanwhile, my luxury limousine transportation to Milwaukee proceeded exactly as authorized, through elite executive limousine coordination, complete with premium champagne service, gourmet catering, executive business amenity, and professional chauffeur coordination that distinguished Fortune 500 executive travel from routine business transportation and commercial service provider. The comprehensive luxury service experience included climate-controlled executive seating, premium refreshment coordination, business communication systems, and professional travel management that reflected my corporate authority and expense authorization privileges. The Milwaukee Fortune 500 Financial Coordination Summit proceeded exactly as planned, where my keynote presentation on integrating corporate campus management with ethical business practices received standing ovation recognition from Fortune 500 chief financial officers and international business coordination specialists who understood the sophisticated nature of corporate expense management and regulatory compliance that balanced business efficiency with fiduciary responsibility and ethical business practices. The professional recognition and Fortune 500 coordination opportunities that resulted from my successful conference presentation included a $2.8 million federal consultation contract for developing integrated corporate expense protocol, international business coordination opportunities with Fortune 500 companies throughout North America, and invitation to serve on the Federal Financial Compliance Advisory Board that would influence corporate expense policy throughout the international business community. But the most meaningful aspect of my Milwaukee conference success was the professional validation and corporate recognition that my children had attempted to undermine through their abandonment and family disrespect, proving that elderly relatives who appear to need business assistance may actually represent the most successful and influential corporate professionals whose expertise and authority exceed their family members' comprehension or professional achievement. The corporate expense consequences had implemented would remain in effect until my children demonstrated appropriate appreciation for elderly relatives and traditional family values through consistent behavior and genuine understanding of the corporate expertise and Fortune 500 authority that they had taken for granted during decades of expense protection and regulatory advocacy that most business families could never access or afford through private corporate consultation and professional financial management services. 6 months have passed since that transformative October day, when I revealed to my children that their corporate expense privileges had disappeared along with their respect for elderly relatives, and the professional transformation has been nothing short of extraordinary, not just in my own life as a respected Fortune 500 consultant, whose corporate expertise continues influencing international business policy, but in the broader lesson this story has taught about the true cost of taking family for granted and the immeasurable value of treating elderly relatives with the dignity and appreciation they deserve during professional transitions and business coordination. The Sullivan Corporate Financial Consulting Group has become the most prestigious Fortune 500 expense management consultation program in North America, with international corporations throughout multiple countries requesting our expertise for system integration and regulatory compliance training that ensures corporate expense databases serve both business efficiency and regulatory accountability standards. Our consultation services don't just provide technical training, they master the art of respecting generational wisdom and maintaining ethical standards that distinguish responsible corporate administration from bureaucratic convenience that prioritizes efficiency over business accountability and regulatory protection. Last month, the Federal Financial Compliance Commission officially adopted our corporate expense integration protocols for international implementation, recognizing my 4 decades of expertise with a federal consulting contract worth The project includes training Fortune 500 administrators, coordinating international corporate expense systems, and developing regulatory protocols that demonstrate how corporate financial technology can serve business needs while maintaining regulatory effectiveness and compliance standards that protect both corporate interests and stakeholder rights. My children's current situation serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences that follow when people prioritize professional convenience over family relationships and assume elderly relatives will continue providing support regardless of treatment received during business transitions and corporate coordination. Struggles and professional complications have become a cautionary tale throughout Chicago's business community about the importance of respecting elderly relatives and maintaining traditional family values that determine access to corporate protection and regulatory advocacy. Patricia's marketing career was permanently damaged by her corporate expense violations and professional reputation issues that stemmed from her conference abandonment and regulatory non-compliance history. Her Fortune 500 client privileges were suspended pending corporate review of her expense account irregularities and professional conduct evaluation, effectively ending her marketing practice and career advancement at Midwest Industrial Solutions. She now works as a contract marketing coordinator for small businesses, earning $52,000 annually, while handling basic marketing coordination that doesn't require Fortune 500 access or professional credentials that were compromised by her expense violations and family disrespect. Michael's business development career at Regional Financial Partners ended permanently when his financial services licensing was revoked due to undisclosed corporate expense violations and regulatory irregularities that federal investigators considered evidence of professional misconduct and financial compliance risk. His federal background review revealed the extent of his expense non-compliance and family relationship failures that demonstrated character flaws incompatible with financial services employment and federal regulatory requirements. He now works as a freelance business consultant, earning inconsistent income between $35,000 and $45,000 annually, while struggling to rebuild professional credentials and compliance eligibility that may never be restored due to federal employment restrictions and industry reputation damage. David's luxury automotive sales career was terminated immediately when Premier Motors, Chicago learned about his corporate expense violations and elderly abandonment during business procedures that demonstrated character flaws incompatible with luxury automotive industry standards and professional representation. His automotive industry relationships and manufacturer credibility were destroyed when luxury automotive professionals understood that his sales success had been dependent on family connections and corporate protection, rather than individual competence and professional achievement. He now works as a sales associate at a used car dealership, earning $41,000 annually, plus commission, while handling basic automotive sales for a business that doesn't require industry relationships or professional credibility that was destroyed by his expense violations and family disrespect. However, my story isn't just about consequences and justice, it's also about the possibility that future generations might learn from their parents' mistakes and choose different approaches to family relationships and elderly respect that could restore their access to professional opportunity and career advancement that traditional family values create for those who demonstrate appropriate appreciation and loyalty to elderly relatives and corporate service. The scholarship fund that I've established for young people who demonstrate respect for elderly relatives and commitment to ethical business practices has already provided educational opportunities for 28 students whose families understand the value of traditional relationships and corporate compliance that creates foundation for professional achievement and community contribution. These scholarships represent hope that future generations will learn from my children's mistakes and choose family loyalty over professional convenience when facing decisions about elderly relatives and business service. As I write this final chapter from my expanded corporate consultation headquarters, surrounded by Fortune 500 commendations that honor my career achievements and international contracts that recognize our corporate expertise, I'm reminded that the most important legacy isn't professional recognition or financial security, it's the values and relationships that determine how expertise serves future generations and community improvement, rather than individual accumulation and family exploitation. Abandoned me during my business conference lost more than corporate expense privileges. They lost the opportunity to participate in Fortune 500 consultation that serves hundreds of businesses and creates professional opportunities for those who understand that real success requires respect elderly relatives and maintaining traditional values that distinguish responsible corporate service from entitled career advancement and family disrespect. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give ungrateful family members is the opportunity to learn that respect for elderly relatives, optional social obligation. It's the foundation for professional credibility and community standing that determines whether families build lasting legacies or destroy opportunities through selfishness and elderly exploitation, that reveals character when it matters most during business transition and corporate coordination activities. Remember, corporate expertise isn't guaranteed family privilege, it's earned recognition of demonstrated values and elderly respect that creates foundation for professional credibility and community service that serves future generations who understand real authority comes from relationships and traditional values rather than individual achievement and family exploitation that ignores the elderly wisdom and sacrifice that made comfortable lives possible through decades of corporate service and fortune. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.